I'll go with you, please.
Oh, okay.
I'll come back maybe to the audience.
Right, Chair Jackson, after all of that, I think we are now ready to go.
Yes, and there's John, so they can stop there.
We do have a quorum.
Yes.
Welcome, everyone, to our monthly meeting of the Commission on Equity for the City of Lacey. Call the meeting to order at 5:32. With that, the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda, previous minutes, and the consent items. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda, previous minutes, and the consent items.
A second. Moved and seconded that the agenda, minutes, and consent items be approved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Who might we have online in addition to our two commissioners? Rihanna.
Hi everyone, this is Rihanna Joseph. I'm a part of the Lacey Youth Council.
Okay, great. So that's our public person and our two commissioners. And for our public comment, we're acknowledging you as being here too, sir.
Jim Stanton. I'm just a Lacey resident. I'm involved with several school committees and I was on the Lacey work group for the homeless area. And I just wanted to kind of see what the feedback was on your joint session with the youth, because I watched that. Anybody that hasn't seen it, I think really should, it's worth a view. So students did it very well, a very good job.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Anyone by phone?
And Chair Jackson, if you are by phone, you would press *9 if you wanted to provide a public comment to the Commission on Equity.
Okay. And there's three commissioners present online. Would you all identify yourselves for the record, please? John?
Hi there, my name is John Hagwood. I'm one of the Commissioners on Equity.
Thank you.
Kim Sauer.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, it's Christine.
Hi, Christine. Welcome. Very good. Our inspirational item this evening is being presented by Commissioner Clay.
See, where did I put it?
Where am I?
No.
That's not it, huh?
Oh, for God's sake. All right. I don't want to get it. Sorry. It's somewhere. I'm gonna read a poem by Joy Harjo. And I'm so sorry.
I just know it's gonna be worth waiting for, so we'll just give Annie a minute here.
Mhm. It's called This Morning I Pray for My Enemies. And Joy Harjo was a poet emeritus for the United States. And whom do I call my enemy? An enemy must be worthy of engagement. I turn in the direction of the sun and keep walking. It's the heart that asks the question, not the furious mind. The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun. It sees and knows everything. It hears the gnashing even as it hears the blessing. The door to the mind should only open from the heart. An enemy who gets in risks the danger of becoming a friend.
Very good. That was worth waiting for. Thank you, Annie.
You're welcome.
Yes, yes. Our business item for the evening, item 4A.
Well, good evening, commissioners, and it is nice again to be in person and also have the remote option. We have not tried this since July. So one thing I will say is be patient. A lot of the activities that we have planned for either, kind of remote or in person. And now we have to try to integrate kind of the split between the two. So the theme that I am asking for is just a little bit of patience as we run through the next couple of exercises with the Commission on Equity. So for the commissioners who are remote, you do not have the abundance of papers that we have out in front of us, which I should have sent out to you all, but I have not yet, so I apologize on that, but I'll be sending this out to you all before the night's over so that you can have access to these materials as well. But I just really quickly want to go over some of the items that are in front of the commission. So we have the agenda packet in front of you all, and this is the full packet for the meeting this evening. Typically would not print all of the packet out for the group, but I wanted to make sure as we're making this transition back into person and having a remote option that you all were able to have it in front of you. And especially because we are going to be doing 2 exercises today with the Athena group, and you can see Tevin Medley has joined us in person, and it's really great to see Tevin in person. And we also have Megan Picard joining us online as well. Hi, Megan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me.
So for the commissioners online, if you want to pull up the agenda that was sent out to you on Friday, it has, what we're going through, and it also has the agenda for our DEI strategic plan, and it's includes the draft equity mission and vision that we all have gone through on a couple of different occasions. And the point tonight is not to revisit these, but more so to provide them in front of you as we talk about some of the exercises that we'll be doing. As we've reiterated through this process, we will have another time to take a look at it, right? We're still in draft format, and we're going to come back based on, this exercise and future conversations that the Commission on Equity has, and continue to take a look at it. But really, we want to take a look at it. And thank you, whoever just shared that on the screen. That's pretty incredible.
Jonathan?
Wow. I'm not quite sure how that one happened, but we'll figure that one out. So it's got the draft vision, mission, and value statement. And in addition to that, it's got the 2 exercises that we're going to be doing here today. And that includes the community connectivity analysis that we're going to be learning a little bit more about as well. The second document that I have in front of you that I all want you to take a real quick look at is the draft bike rack exercise. And so this was from the feedback that I received online through our online tool. And as you can see, it shows you the source. It shows you what the requested information or maybe the idea was. broadly speaking, what category it fits under. And I noticed in some of the requests and comments that there was a data request, so I've put that in another category as well. And then also just outlined, potential city roles and efforts and impact, which we'll get to a little bit later this evening, of introducing that idea as we continue on the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. One thing I want to note is that in addition to having the commissioners' ideas that came through that online, I also took our community engagement feedback up to this point, and I have put that in line as well. So just as a reminder to the commission, as well as anybody who might be listening to the meeting online or attending here in person, some of the engagement activities that have occurred to date is the Commission on Equity has held 2 engagement opportunities in November, also had an alternative online engagement activity, and has had a focus meeting with the Lacey Youth Council, and has also attended the Lacey Cultural Celebration. So some of that feedback has been collected and put into this draft bike rack exercise as well, for you all to take a look at as we are contemplating the exercise that we're going to be doing here in a couple of minutes, and then as we continue to contemplate the DEI strategic plan moving forward. The single page that you have in front of you is the exercise that we are about to engage in right now, which is the community connection analysis, or connectivity analysis, excuse me. And this is the online feedback that we received from some of the commissioners, but you can see we've only got a page, but we're going to be augmenting that today. And that's one of the exercises that we're really excited to be here to do. So before I turn it over to the Athena group to kind of walk us through some of the exercises, any questions on the materials that are in front of the commission? Any questions from the commissioners who are attending online?
I'm good.
Right. Well, then with that, I am happy to introduce Tevin Medley in person again.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tevin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a partner at the Athena Group. I lead our Idea Plus J service delivery, which is that inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, and justice. I'm here with Megan Picard. For folks who recall, Megan and I joined this project early on. Megan was here to talk about, how do we connect with the community? How do we find out where those connectors are and engage them throughout the process, not just for the time that we're here together, but also into the future as plans are updated. We want to revisit things that we've drafted and want to really engage folks. And so for the next piece, what we're going to do is Megan's going to, I believe we're going to play a video, the introductory video on the CCA. And then we're going to do a Q&A. So, if folks have questions about the process, about what it looks like, and then Megan's going to walk us through the activity, which is connecting or putting up on what we have here on the walls, our known networks, and then we're going to look at what's missing here. And so with that, we will share you want to share the video, or should we just go into the?
Are you looking to for me to share the video, or are you sharing the video from there? Oh,
Megan, we're pulling it up. It's just taking a second here.
no worries, just checking. Hello, and thank you
Seems like her voice is like over there.
for joining me in this brief overview of how you
Just really quickly, can you all hear the video? Can you all hear the
Not
video?
very well.
It seems like her voice is over there.
That speaker's on over there.
can conduct your own community connectivity analysis, a tool to support inclusive community engagement and resilience.
My name is Megan Picard, and I'm a partner at the Athena Group. I lead our community engagement pillar of services, and I adapted the tool that I'm going to share with you today from the Orton Family Foundation's Community Heart and Soul program. The community connectivity analysis is the first part of Athena's Resilient Communities philosophy and a first step in truly inclusive community engagement. Why use the CCA? There are 3 big questions you can use it to answer. 1, who's in our community? 2, how are people connected to each other in our community? And who's not connected? And 3, what are the best ways to reach and engage everyone? In a moment, I'm going to walk you through these 6 simple steps to conducting a community connectivity analysis. To get started, I strongly recommend that you gather as diverse a group as you can to help with at least steps 1 to 3. The more community wisdom you have in the room, the more robust your initial analysis will be. Of course, you should also check the group's thinking along the way as you talk with trusted connectors to gather information for steps 4 and 5. One last thing before diving into the steps. I want to share 2 terms that I will use. First, community. It can have a much broader meaning, but for the purposes of this simple overview of the CCA process, I mean all residents in a geographic area, your city, or possibly an area within those boundaries, like a single neighborhood or school catchment area. Second, for those of you who may be wondering, an affinity group is a group of people linked by shared interests or other characteristics that can have an impact on life experiences, like race, age, or level of income. With that, let's get into the steps. First, we identify all the affinity groups that make up the community you want to engage. For this step, I offer 2 alternative approaches. Either way can lead to the same results in the end, so it's up to you to decide which way makes more sense for you to begin. One way is to start thinking about the whole community orientation, which you see on the left side of the screen. To do this, grab a whiteboard and a pen, virtual or real, and start brainstorming with your group. Ask yourselves, what are all the affinity groups that make up our community? It can be helpful to review the community profile produced by the U.S. Census Bureau to spark the group's thinking. Be sure to think beyond the big demographic categories you find there too. For instance, if you want to reach teenagers, it's important to consider the full diversity among them and get more specific in your list, like young people involved in the arts or who are homeschooled. Also, be sure to consider all people who may have been missing from community activities or decision-making processes in the past. Now, as an alternative, which you see on the right side of the screen, is an easier starting point for some. Here, you can begin your analysis by thinking about connections to the broader community from your leadership group. Which groups do you each meet with, visit with, share interests and experiences with? Once you have listed all your connections, consider who is missing and add them to the list. Who's in the community that your group is not connected to? Again, you can use your community profile to help with this. In step 2, you'll identify networks associated with each affinity group. Networks may be community organizations like a shelter provider for people who are unhoused, or a particular church, synagogue, or mosque where a certain affinity group is known to gather. They may also be less formal groups related to a particular circumstance, like customers at a particular barbershop or salon. For this step, then, you want to review the list of affinity groups from step 1. Think of all the ways they're connected as a group and identify 1 or more major networks for each one. If you're really struggling to think about how a particular affinity group is connected to one another, it is possible that they aren't. They may be more isolated. Be sure to note this. You can ask connectors about this while you're gathering information for steps 4 and 5. If you find no additional information then, I suggest you consider developing a network of some kind to close that gap, since it's an important part of community resilience. Need help? You can book time with one of Athena's community engagement specialists, like me, to help develop a strategy. Now, in step 3, you'll identify network connectors. Connectors are people who are trusted by others in the network to provide sound counsel, useful information, and to help bring people together for decision-making, celebrations, and more. You might also refer to these individuals as trusted advocates. To complete this step, you'll review the list of networks identified in step 2 and identify at least one person that is active in that network and who is trusted by or able to facilitate connection with many people in the group identified in step 1, like a youth minister or an outreach worker or a salon manager. Include his, her, their contact information if available. Don't know this information? Ask someone on your planning team to volunteer to get it. And now I'm sharing steps 4 to 5 together, since you can often gather this information at the same time from the connectors you identified in step 3. Reach out to them, let them know what you're doing, and ask them if they'd be willing to share information about communication and engagement opportunities and preferences among the group or groups that they're connected to. Start with communication channels, meaning all the ways information is typically shared among the group. You may need to offer some examples to help the connectors understand what you're looking for. So I'm offering a few examples here. You might ask if the group has a regular newsletter, social media, or a well-used bulletin board. Or maybe people are used to getting blast emails or text messages or announcements in church. If so, find out if there's a possibility that you could share information through it. And if so, find out all the details you need to do so, like editorial guidelines and schedule. Then you can talk about engagement opportunities and preferences. By engagement opportunities, I mean events, meetings, and other places where people in an affinity group or network are known to gather or visit, where you may be able to talk with them, hear from them, or learn from them in some way. It is possible that this doesn't exist for a group. In that case, you'll need to plan a separate event or plan to reach folks through a brief survey, depending on what you learn about the group's preferences. Now, by preferences, I mean everything from the type of interaction you'll design, to the language or languages you'll communicate in, or the food you should be sure to include. Maybe a traditional community meeting with a presentation and Q&A or comment period is great for some groups. For others, you'll have more success engaging them by designing coasters with an important question on them and asking local bars to distribute them and post responses on their wall. And still others love to talk story in knitting circles or packing summer lunch boxes for kids. And still others are private and will only respond to confidential surveys, or they may open up in one-on-one conversations. Connectors are your best source for this information. Since engagement isn't always their expertise, though, you may also need to prompt them with some of these ideas. All the information you have gathered so far can be recorded in a simple spreadsheet like the one on the screen. This worksheet is also included in the CCA guide that you can access through the link on the screen. Now the last step. Review your data to find connections. Are groups connected by the same connector? Do any groups access the same communication channels or participate in the same engagement opportunities or have the same or similar engagement preferences? With this information, you can map the connections as well as any groups that are not connected to others. You can do this by using formal mapping software, sorting sticky notes on a wall, or drawing lines between network names on a whiteboard and noting how each group is connected. The example you see on the screen was done for a project on homelessness and was organized by the leadership group Connections First. With information like this, you can develop an engagement plan that meets people where and how they are most comfortable and most likely want to participate, and that makes the most efficient use of resources by reaching connected groups in the same way. Also, and very important, you can make special note of gaps in connectivity, which is where I encourage you to lean in. What special steps will you take to ensure that those voices are included in your engagement effort? The more you do this, the better your engagement efforts will be, and the more connected and resilient your community can become. Thank you all for taking this time to learn about conducting a community connectivity analysis. Please take a moment to share feedback so we can improve this information as we share it with others. Thank you again.
Thanks so much. Okay, so for the activity, what I would like to do is prior to jumping in, I want to see if folks have any questions on CCA that Megan might be able to answer. Is it clear? Do you have anything that you'd like to know more about? And then for today, I believe what we're going to do is just start with affinity groups. So for folks who are joining us virtually, to talk about who are these affinity groups, who are we wanting to connect with, and so for now, just any questions folks have on this process that Megan could answer for us.
So this is Kim, and I noticed in your presentation, Megan, you said race. I think instead of race, maybe we should say like cultural affinity. I don't know, that seems to me, are we supposed to move away, kind of like separating us by race? So.
Thanks for that input, and I'm happy. We're always adapting and evolving the tool, so I think that's great advice, and I will immediately follow that in our next iteration. And I encourage you all to adapt this to really make it work for you. So it's a starting place that you can adjust from there.
I didn't understand Kim's question. What is she suggesting in lieu of race?
Cultural. So yeah, we share like cultural background together rather than race. So yeah, that's what I would like to kind of propose one of the affinity group to be the people who are sharing cultural background rather than based on race.
So is that in lieu of or in addition to? That's what I'm trying to understand.
It's in lieu of.
So Chair Jackson, Commissioners, I would, go back a couple of diversity, equity, inclusion meetings ago, and we had talked about different intersectionality and the concept and different identities that are tied into that. And I believe the point of this exercise is really to say, can we map this out holistically? So not just looking at, just race, but also considering things like LGBTQIA, other types of identities that might be in a group itself, and to see again what the overlap and the connectivity and the connection with the community is. Megan, anything to add on that?
Yes, I that's great, and I think when you're looking at cultural affinity groups, you'll probably really benefit from thinking at a much deeper level than the high level race demographics. Say if you're looking at your census data, we're recommending, check your thinking about who all is living in the community, and that first level of kind of demographics you get from the Census Bureau is at that kind of rolled up race level, but you can dig down and get a better sense of all the array of nationality, and use that as at least a beginning proxy of just to check thinking. on cultural groups that may be in the community, but also rely on your, really bring your personal wisdom to the table to help kind of get a feel for all the different segments of the community, whether you're looking at cultural groups or groups organized by age or differing abilities or however you're kind of looking at what are all the segments, various segments of our community, to which many of us will be part of multiple groups, right? Nobody has a singular identity, but to get a feel for all the different groups that make up the community and make Lacey the vibrant and diverse community that it is.
Yeah, I clearly understand the intersectionality focus we're trying to get to. So my thought would be cultural groups in addition to, as opposed to in lieu of. Racial groups are definitely an affinity group, whether it's big, small, in the middle. And then the intersectionality of every other thing we can come there intersects somewhere. But for this whole issue of equity and inclusion and diversion, that's one of the big categories I think we need to start with and go from there, showing, how many are also poor, also military, also LGBTQ, also share some cultural, but that inclusivity and the race has been a major element of exclusivity. A major element of exclusivity. And so the further away we get from the harder issues to deal with, the further we're getting away from trying to achieve what I think we're trying to achieve. And we'll hit the intersectionality all along the way, I think. But that's where my thoughts are coming from.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And if I may, I think a big piece of it is understanding how groups define themselves versus how we might, define them or think of them. And so really engaging with folks to find out, what do you call yourself? Or if you're a part of this group or collective, what does that group call themselves? And leading with that. And so before we jump into the activity, if there are any other questions, and I love the conversation and discussion, but if there are any other questions on affinity groups versus affinity group networks or network connectors, anything related to the CCA that we might want to ask before we go to the next piece, which is where we're gonna each kind of take a board and start to chart out some of these groups that we know of, and then ask ourselves, well, who's missing?
I don't know, I think as we do it, it'll become more clear if we just do at least one, then.
And it would be helpful to me to go back and make reference to things as we go through this later on. The PowerPoint that Megan just presented, that was, it moved pretty fast, but there were some critical things. I looked at the video online and it helped me, but I had to stop on some of them and digest it. And she kind of went through them pretty fast, and it made the worksheet much more, I won't say palatable, but useful and understandable. So if we could be shared with her PowerPoint presentation, that might help us as we.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I believe we need 1, 2, 3 volunteers to, we're gonna kind of chart ourselves out. There's a board in the back. On this side, there's a board that is coming down a little bit.
So, yeah, so let's just, on that note, I was anticipating, a few more commissioners in person. So I think we could actually share a board, because again, as we learned in the presentation, that sometimes it's really helpful to get people together talking and kind of, building off of each other and adding to their lists. So I think this one's a fantastic one. If you all don't mind, we could all go over there and run through this exercise. Megan mentioned in the PowerPoint presentation that there's 2 ways really to look at this as a starting point. You can start with the whole community approach, or you can start with the leadership approach. And Megan outlined that sometimes it's easier to think about, with the commission and being the leaders and the leadership of the group, who are the affinity groups that you are aware of, and then building out from there with, what's missing beyond the leadership group. That doesn't mean that's how you all have to approach it. Just want to recognize that that was something that, Megan did bring up as part of this, that there are two ways to really starting this conversation. And one is to think out large, what's the whole community? And the other one is to start small, maybe, who you have experiences interacting with or know of, et cetera. Megan or Tevin, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I really, as you're kind of dipping your toes into this, I really do encourage starting with that question. You can each ask yourselves, who am I connected to in the community? What groups do I interact with regularly? And just, start getting those connections that are connected to each of you up on the wall, and then you can take a look at it and say, all right, think about the community more broadly. Who's missing? You can really begin to see where those gaps are, and then develop your plan from there. One, to fill the gaps, and then two, to add the details to the groups that you're already connected to and each know pretty well.
I think that's great. So if we wanted, I guess we could kind of round robin this one for as a starting point. So if folks are comfortable sharing, what are some of those groups that you're connected to? And as you share, I'll jot them down on the list.
Well, I'll start. The Divine 9 plus 1. And the plus 1 are the links.
It's really the Black fraternities and sororities.
Yeah, that's on the next line, yeah.
Yeah.
So it might be helpful to just to write a little bit so we can all see it.
Yeah, I can't see it.
Divine 9.
Divine 9, yeah. Plus 1. That's the links, LINKS in parentheses would be that one.
Great. Others?
We're doing number 1.
Just
Playing
groups
it
that we're
out.
already affiliated with. So what are the connections that we already have? Which groups are those? And also folks who are joining via video today, feel free to contribute.
This is Kim. So the groups that I belong to, or that I relate to, that I feel. So like, for example, do I say, I am affiliated with immigrant community, or is it not specific enough?
That could be, one big bucket. If there are certain immigrant communities that you're particularly connected to, if you're connected to a broad group of multicultural immigrant communities.
Okay, how about then I am affiliated with a Korean American Grocers Association, and also with Multicultural Service Center of South Sound.
Can I ask you a question, Kim, on that?
Grocers Association.
Grocers.
Would you consider, Kim, both of those being networks that help to connect into immigrant communities?
Yes, definitely.
Great. So just as I asked that clarifying question, because when we think about, you know, kind of the affinity groups being a little bit more generic, and then say the Korean American Grocers Association being a network, and then there may be an individual who is affiliated with that association that people really turn to get their information, to, yeah, those kinds of things. And that would be your connector. So this was just a good example to show those first three steps in the analysis.
Right, where they have a newsletter. I mean, some of the examples that you shared, they definitely have those elements there.
Great. So you can fill out you know, one piece of the analysis all the way across the steps, it sounds like.
Right.
I'm gonna go ahead and add newsletter to number 4, which is communication channel for that one.
Okay.
Other affinity groups.
I have down on our paper, LGBTQ adults, and then as another affinity group, youth.
Okay.
And usually those might be in two different ones, but.
Yeah, especially if this is another great example, pulling this out and thinking, you know, the answers you might get about who's the trusted connector, the best ways to engage and connect and communicate, those answers may be really different for the adult group and the group of younger people. And so I think it's wise to separate those into two separate affinity groups.
Okay, great.
And so Megan, just to clarify, as we're starting this, would you recommend separating them into two different affinity groups, or would you actually recommend having a affinity group and then having those as two separate group networks?
That's a great question. And, you know, it's kind of a hazy line. There's a little bit more of an art to this than a science. So I think in the end, it's what makes sense for you. In my mind, I would probably do separate affinity groups and then look at what are the organizations, systems, you know, what is the kind of organizing mechanism? How are folks actually connected to each other? So if I am a young person who identifies as queer, and, you know, I might be a part of, say, an after-school group at my high school. That would be my network that helps me connect into other people who share that affinity. And then you would get more specific about who the connector is to help reach others in the group. So I just keep going through these three that kind of helps if you want to stay kind of broad at the affinity group level. Of course, using language that, you know, how people identify themselves. And you might have to learn that later. So this is always a work in progress that you can continue to refine, and then give those specific channels, specific networks for the groups in the community. And this would be part of finding out, we have a substantial number of young people who identify as lesbian, gay, you know, bisexual, LGBTQ plus, and maybe there isn't an actual network in the community that connects people together. So that's important information if that's the case. So that's why I would lean toward being more specific at the network level and less specific at the affinity group level.
That's great. Other affinity groups?
Yes.
Please.
And Commissioner Hart, you may be able to help me better state this, but I'm looking at National Guard, Reserve, veterans, military spouses as an affinity group. So the military.
Okay.
Commissioner Hart, we can't hear your audio.
You're muted now. There we go.
We still can't hear you. I'd recommend checking your audio source to see if the correct microphone's on.
For any of these groups, do we have and we can take a short pause here just to look through what we have so far, but have folks mentioned any affinity groups that you've already shared that we know maybe what those networks are, or some of those network connectors, or any things that I can fill in between? Feel free to stop me and let me know, and I'll jot those down.
How does that work? Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering why I kept saying mine and nobody could hear. Okay. So I actually have a few. I had military, and of course that kind of encompasses not just active duty, veteran, guard, the military spouses, but then you also have dual citizens. So you've got veterans who maybe also work for the federal government, or like myself, I was a military spouse that also worked for the federal government too. So you've got that intersectionality. And then with the youth, you've got the artists. I had children that were dancers. They're also band, they call themselves band geeks. So, and musicians and theater kids, sport athlete children or youth. You've got the entrepreneurs. So that's another group that I'm a part of, as well as makers. So those would be a few.
And also like military minorities, veterans, which is actually a group that I'm a part of, but more specifically like LGBT veterans and veterans of color.
Mm.
And would we want
To
to add?
add, sorry, to add, I would also say service members' children, like military brats could also be a part of that.
Yeah, dependents, so not just spouses. Usually they think of spouses, but they also have the youth that are in the that are there too, as well as parents. That's definitely one, because a lot of times you don't think that maybe they may have retired here because they had a family member that was here, and so now that family member is encompassed and they're an extended family. Maybe they're taking care of them now. So yes.
So yeah, I like to also add small business / immigrant business owners.
Small business /
Immigrant
business owners.
And that one could also be kind of segmented into two, because you've got the ones that actually have a storefront, and then the ones that don't have a storefront, plus the ones that maybe this is their side hustle, they have a full-time job in addition. And that's part of my community too.
I have churches / religious community groups.
Yeah, for me, small, but I also have a Korean school student group.
What?
Korean schools, yeah, Korean school students group. So, which I teach Korean over the weekend. I mean, during weekends. So, I have that group.
Is there a major category or affinity group that we can list that would cover, say, the education, and then have all of these as connectors associated with it?
Oh, yeah.
Because for me, if I say education as an affinity group, that would include, say, the school district, and the St. Martin's College, and maybe some of the technical colleges.
Not to mention the homeschoolers and private school.
Right, homeschool, private schools, because even with the student council, there was a kid from the Catholic school.
Right.
To the Catholic school. So I don't know if education, and then there are so many underneath that could connect, like the Korean, schools you talked about, and others. Whether we have a college, we have university, we have technical schools, private schools, home schools. Yeah. Then I also had the Squally tribe, and I don't know, should we say the Squally tribe, should we just say the Native American, the native tribe, indigenous or something, and then have the connecting organizations underneath.
Okay, do we off the top of our head know who that connecting organization is, or that affinity group network for the tribes?
Who would be the network?
Mhm.
Where would the
Like
network
if there's
come
a
from?
community center or a community group, or
They have a community center, they have a website. They
And
have,
the tribal councils
Tribal
and
council.
tribal headquarters and each particular
they have,
group.
a student group.
I think that the city probably has some contacts with the tribe. I know that they've done work with them before, but my mom actually lives on the reservation, so I can probably get some contacts with the tribe if we need that. But I was also going to say religious groups, and then education also. I was going to add parents as an affinity group. And then for the state government, they have business resource groups, which are state workers who are affiliated with different, like we're talking about affinity groups. So they have BUILD, which is Blacks United in Leadership. I can't remember the exact acronym, but then they have Rainbow, and they have a couple other different ones.
One of them is Washington Immigrant Network, which I'm part of. And so I'm wondering, do we only put for the city of Lacey, or are we like talking about beyond that? That's why I wasn't so sure if I wanted to mention BRGs or not, business resource group or not, because I didn't know if it was affecting here or not, what we are trying to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of state workers that live in the city of Lacey, I think, that probably belong, but I don't see why I don't know. I guess I don't know. I mean, because it's all, we're all a community. And they all
It's
share
our neighbor.
resources.
Yeah, I mean, we've got that, we're talking the reservation. That's not the city of Lacey. So, I mean, it's all connected. They're our neighbor, and I would assume that that would affect the outskirts as well.
I mean, I definitely have connection with pretty much all BRGs. So if we need anything, we have connection. I can utilize their communication channels, the engagement opportunities, and stuff like that. And I'm also wondering, do I bring like Korean immigrant community, right? Korean population. Obviously, I have connections with them, through Korean Association and things like that. So do we want to put that here too?
Step in with a couple of thoughts. Okay. One is I encourage you to think about, it's obviously, whenever I'm talking to people about community engagement, I'm always encouraging them to put the purpose of the engagement first, and thinking about how you're designing it, who all cares about what it is that you're wanting to talk about, and gathering, who's going to be impacted, and what do they care about, and so that you really design, a specific engagement to match appropriately whatever the purpose of that engagement is. So thinking about this, the broader, these groups where you're starting to go beyond, maybe it's a group that is countywide, maybe it's a network that's actually statewide. Try to think about where is the intersection with Lacey and what y'all might want to be engaging with the community on. So in terms of these state groups, your point, Commissioner Stolberg, is that yeah, many state workers, right, in the area there, and certainly that are residents in Lacey. So what are the networks that actually would connect Lacey residents who are also state workers? Or, you know, maybe it is more about that kind of intersection with Lacey and state policy that happens to you know, because of the county that you're living in. There's a lot deeper connection, I think, to state level conversation than you might find in you know, say in Yakima. You know, so that said, again, there's that kind of more art than science, and maybe you want to just flag networks that you identify that go broader than the city, so that each time you're planning for an engagement, you're thinking, do we need to make an effort to engage this affinity group on this topic?
And to a point to add, especially in the African American community, many of the organizations are like South Sound organization. We'll have a chapter like my fraternity, you know, the mailing address is in Tacoma, but we have members, Thurston County, Pierce County, King County. You know, our foundation has, I work with Lacey address, but we have members in Thurston County and in Pierce County and some in South King County. So we have a lot of organizations because of the small African-American population. It stretches beyond like the city of Lacey or the city of Tacoma. It'll be more of a South Sound type of organization. Like the Divine Nine, you know, we have members in all of those counties that participate. They have a chapter, but it's multi-county chapter that works together.
Nice.
But if we were getting our purpose to get a focus group to sit down with us to talk, then we would ask, I would think, we would ask that organization
For the Lacey,
for
Thurston
your
County
Lacey
residents.
residents.
And I would say too, you know, I think, you know, we've talked about residents a lot too, but really Lacey community members, right? So people that impact the community, and that doesn't mean that they just live here. Maybe they own a business, they operate a business, they come here to shop, they come here to go to events. Right? And so, you know, to think the interaction with the greater Lacey community.
So what I'd like to do is, so I'm definitely running out of space here on this side, but I think that's okay. So if, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through and read through what we have here, and then I'm gonna jot down wherever I have room, what else is missing from the list. And then I would like to take this with me if that's all right, and I'll, forgive my penmanship. So I'll type it up and make sure that that's shareable and legible that way. So I'm gonna go back through, and then we'll just fill in any gaps just for this first one on affinity groups to make sure that I covered them all. Commissioner Hart had a few that they kind of went pretty quick, so I might have missed them, but I heard you say something about arts students and other students. And so we'll just go through what we have and then add to it, and then we'll move on.
Well, it feels like for our goal of getting people to sit around a table and talk, that all of our races should be on there, that not only the African Americans who belong to the
Divine Nine, yeah.
Divine Nine, but we need some voices from the Hispanic community. We need some voices from the Pacific Islanders. You know, we need some voices from the Black community that are not in those. I mean, it feels broad, but you go broad and then you figure out smaller. I mean,
And I think that's something that we heard earlier, though, is that, you know, these groups are gonna have some diversity to them as well, that intersectional piece
right.
around, you know, the LGBTQIA plus youth also perhaps being, you know, part of other groups, you know, race-wise or other intersecting
Yeah,
identities.
right.
And so I think that's perfect.
Yeah, well, to a point, I think maybe we should just add Hispanic and there, and I don't know, based on the census, the major races here that were on the census as affinity group, and then there should be interconnectivity by having them on the list.
We can kind of do a catch-all if we say BIPOC community.
There we go. Well, yeah,
We can. I hate that word, but we can. I know what you mean.
yeah.
But when we supposed to go through this and then see who's not on the list? So are we there now?
With BIPOC, with that,
So commissioners, I think that's a great question, Commissioner Sauer, is if we were even finished kind of going through the affinity groups. I think we ran out of space over here on the paper, but we're just gonna continue on. So certainly if there are more affinity groups that you all know of or are involved in or have experienced in the Greater Lacey community, certainly please put that up there. And then also to be thinking, you know, we'll have Tevin here read through the list in just a second, but also who is missing or what needs to be added as we move through that. And what I will say is, you know, we are here today starting this activity, right? So we are brainstorming, and certainly, you know, I have been to plenty of meetings where I've walked away and said, oh my goodness, I had like 4 more things I wanted to add on there. So certainly, please jot those down. I sent out the packet in the agenda, so you can access all of that information. So if you want to take some time and continue to fill out, you know, the list of affinity groups that maybe you came up with, or some ideas that you got from this group, and continue the exercise moving forward, please fill that out. Please feel free to send that to me, and we can compile this as we continue on this draft community connectivity analysis.
Thanks for the chat. And so focusing on number 1 here, just affinity groups. So we have Divine 9+1, Links, Immigrant Community, Korean American Grocers, LGBTQI plus adults separated from youth, military and veterans, dual citizens, spouses, service members' children, small businesses and immigrant business owners. Hardly read mine there. It's, I think it says churches and religion, religious community groups, Korean school student groups, education as a more broad category, tribes, parents, resource groups, Washington Immigrant Network, Korean Association, and BIPOC community. And then we can do a rapid fire. Folks just want to, you know, shout some out, and I'll write them down as I hear them.
Special needs and homelessness.
Pardon?
Special needs and homelessness.
That's what I was just gonna say. Mental health as well.
Yeah. Christine, we think alike, girl.
And when you say mental health, are you referring to folks that might be
Part of NAMI or any other group like that.
Yeah, caregivers and respite too.
Low income and food insecure.
I don't know if this is a stretch, but can we put low wage worker?
She said road rage.
Wage.
Yes.
Wage.
Wage, okay, I thought you said road rage, okay. We have those too. But, okay.
And getting back to the point made earlier about the racial groups as affinity groups, I think that they need to be listed here. Who do we have in the city of Lacey? In addition to African Americans, Korean Americans,
Hispanic.
Islanders, Hispanic, who makes up? We're now talking about who makes up of the city of Lacey and its surrounding areas. And we've got to identify them as we try to identify whose voices are missing at the table. Got to.
There's a Cambodian community, there's a Vietnamese community, Filipino community. Are we gonna separate them all out like that, or just kind of do it like people of color, Asian community?
Well, I think we should defer to the census, those that
Enough
came
of
up
them that they make a group, yeah.
right on the census that had a percentage, you know, and it's probably about 5 of them.
So Commissioner Brown, or Vice Chair Brown, excuse me, what I will say is when you look at the census, you often get larger categorizations, but you actually break that down even to more degree, and you will find, you know, definitely percentages. So I just want to make everybody aware that you can take and disaggregate some of the broader race categories that are provided on the census.
Also, some of those categories, you know, it might be multiracial, and it may not show that someone is African American and something else. It just shows the race is multiracial, and that can be anything just on, you know, on paper.
Can we just pin that and look at it more to just kind of see where we want to go with that? Because
That's a large group in Lacey.
Multiracial?
yeah,
Yeah, multiracial, biracial. It's a large group, especially in our schools.
grandkids.
Are we taking into account people in the community who get incarcerated or out on parole?
Let me think of the term. Formerly incarcerated?
Yes. I don't have anybody that I know of, but yeah.
Part on that
One
last point, where you said, I don't know anybody, you know, or how they're connected. So as you're doing this, just as you've done, you know, identify folks and identify those gaps in information, because this is something that you can use on an ongoing basis. Some people have gotten really creative where they've, you know, done like these big kind of murals where they're like the people in our community and all these different, and asked at like the ends of events for people to say, and here's this, you know, you're like, who are we and how are we connected? And then so identifying these groups that connect in, so you build on this base of information that you all bring to the table, like every time you connect beyond the group.
Yeah.
And there's the incarcerated youth too, so that's, I think that falls under like child family services or something like that, that they fall under that umbrella.
Do we want to put like age, you know, we talked about youth, students, how about elderly population?
We need some attention.
Talk about us.
All right, so we're gonna have opportunity to come back to this. I'm gonna take this and type it out and make it nice and neat for all of us. And then just, I guess, a couple moments break while we get set up for the next activity. But any last questions for Megan before she adjourns?
I just would ask, are you aware of any major, you know, affinity groups, like area that we just missed? Anything that almost always make the list?
Well, you covered a lot of gaps right there at the end. Off the top of my head, I'm a pretty visual person, so I can't quite tell if there's anything. There's nothing jumping out at me that's missing, but I'll be happy to take a look at the list that Tevin drafts up and share some additional notes back or just some questions back maybe to think about for taking it to that next level and considering whether there are other gaps.
Great, thank you.
If I may ask if folks would want to add one more group is survivors of domestic violence, just from my work that I always like to put that one on there.
No.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Megan, for joining us for this piece and sharing. And we're gonna get set up for the next activity, which is a visioning for some of the strategic planning that's coming next.
Awesome. Thank you all for having me. Have a great rest of your meeting, and it was really a pleasure to be with you today. Take care.
Nice to see you again.
And before we take just a real quick break, commissioners, I just want to reiterate one more time that, again, we're starting this process, right? And, this is kind of our initial conversation on it. I will resend out a link to where we all can access this information and continue to build off of this information as well. I know I sent one a couple of weeks ago, but this one, once Tevin gets the list all put together, we can add to that, and then we can continue to build on it, when we're out next month or so, or to continue to think about it, so we can reconvene and, have more progress and have more conversations about the list that we're creating.
And fill in some of the
Correct.
networking and
Yep.
whatnot.
Well, I have a question. Do we get a check off by meeting with the youth council last month on this? Did we-
I think the best way to describe that is, maybe a pat on the back, right? But we're
Oh,
gonna
okay.
continue those efforts, with the Lacey Youth, and Lacey Youth Council is one of the affinity groups probably within the Lacey Youth.
Okay.
But certainly, I think what we heard too from our engagement session with them is that they would like to continue to be able to interact with the Commission on Equity and like to continue to do, youth-led initiatives here in the city. So I think that's a good opportunity moving forward to continue with focus groups on.
Yeah, I think that was a great group to
That was-
do first, to work with first. That was a great group. Like, thumbs up. Yeah,
Big smile.
yeah.
All right, so let's take a real quick 5-minute break. So it is around 6:45. So if we can all reconvene at 6:50, Tevin and I are gonna change the room up just a little bit, and we'll come back and do the second part of our DEI strategic plan work session. There's a microwave in that room. Yeah. If you have some items on the tables, if you want to just kind of collect them, we're gonna put these out across the tables here for this next activity. You don't need to move entirely, but if you want to
Yes.
consolidate, that would be
Yep.
helpful for us. And I learned you got to use stronger tape apparently over there. Look into that, Jim.
Yeah. Take it to college.
Thank you for that recommendation. I'll take a look into that. Yes, we need one more. Might have one more spot that I need, so let me.
All right.
This is, we can clean all
Those
of
two
that
are
up.
extra,
Yeah.
extra sets of material. And I'm back where I started.
I'm not sure that you can.
One more down here.
Yeah, and
What I can do is, I'm gonna work with the folks joining virtually. And maybe the folks here not joining virtually can work together.
Yeah, I think that's a great
It
idea.
is, except that what they did is, we had 10 students, we were supposed to have 10 students from each grade, from each high school, plus the high school, I think, is basically trades, right? And so that should have been about 130. I think they had maybe 20 or 25 seats, and they weren't sure why, but it was kind of a scattered. But they put them kind of a staff recorder, and then they had from 3 to 5 students in each table, mixed high schools, mixed grades, pre-assigned. So they had discussions with all of them. How it was, and this is true. Yes. Like, what are they? It's their. And so they're. Most of the students just want to belong to something.
Go home and go straight to bed and go through all of this. Oh my God. It's gonna be exhausted.
I'm expecting you to answer on every single one too.
Oh my.
Again, a start of a process, right?
No, let's do it all. Let's just.
All right, we're ready. Let's ready.
I work in the private sector. If we had to stay to midnight, 2 a.m., let's get it done.
Noted. Always make a meeting, not at in the evening then with Cliff. Make sure it's in the morning, right?
Early.
You're a morning person, right?
I'm a morning person.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
They were, but the difference is.
These mixer early in the morning.
They
Yep.
were- they were picked. They
And then
wanted-
some
well,
late nights, but then
They wanted to be. Yeah.
that's the thing about it. Always, I was,
10
I was always
students.
solid. I don't mind working real late.
And he thought were the.
I know what's gonna happen the next day, or maybe I'll wait Friday. Check my email.
If
call
that's
it a day.
Friday, wait till Monday. Huh?
Right.
So it's
Check my
kind
email
of.
and call it a day.
Yeah.
It's a mixed bag, but
Yeah.
the big thing is the discussion. The fact that there was youth discussing it.
I'm sure you're freezing up here.
Older adults.
Oh,
Where you live?
I live in a Union.
You know,
Union.
Union what?
Washington.
All the Brook Inn.
Yeah.
Oh, you live in Washington? I didn't know that. I thought you were in California.
I'm from California.
Union or Union Gap?
Just Union.
one of
No, is
the
that by
things
Yakima?
that is
Do you know Hood Canal?
the school district.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's right on Hood Canal.
A little over 60.
Well, I did see the
Alderbrook.
census. You might be right.
It's closer to Alderbrook.
It is, yep, it is very close to Alderbrook. Nice area.
60 different whole languages. So.
So you drove over, I thought you had flown in Cali or something.
No, nope, just about 50 minutes from here.
The same thing with.
Did you jump back in?
All right, I think we're all, it is 6:50, so that is our 5-minute break right there.
Okay, so for the next activity, I'm gonna support the folks joining virtually. And then the folks who are here are gonna work together. So what we're gonna do is I wanna revisit quickly draft mission statement. What we have on the papers in front of us are broad categories, which will hopefully end up in our strategic plan. So we have housing, workforce, work environment, criminal justice, communications and language enhancements, community engagement, access, social services, individual family support, public safety, economic opportunities, other essential life activities, measurement, accountability, partnerships, workforce development, cultural competency and diversity, service delivery, budgeting, transportation infrastructure. So as we think about these broad categories for change, I'm just going to read through our draft mission statement. The city is committed to delivering exceptional public services, policies, and programs that integrate equity and social justice as core principles as we continue to grow as a vibrant and thriving community. The city is committed to working collaboratively with community partners to help create equitable access to opportunities and resources for all community members. So that's the mission. The vision is, what does the world look like after that mission is accomplished? And I'll quickly revisit the vision statement that we have drafted. The draft vision statement reads, the city of Lacey is an inclusive community that embraces the gifts, talents, experiences, and contributions of all community members and works collaboratively, internally and externally to advance equity in Lacey. Lacey is a community where change starts by listening. Diversity is celebrated. Opportunities are equitable. Partnerships are cultivated. Barriers to full participation are eliminated, and accountability is central to achieving the above. So in these broad categories, and also using, I guess as a guide, the bike rack exercise in these same categories, what do we see as of right now needing to happen in these categories for those statements to be true? I will say, so some of my work with organizations on mission, vision, values, and operationalizing equity, we want to make sure that it's accurate to what's actually happening. So I've heard someone say, no false advertising. And so in these categories, for these updated drafts to be true, what changes do we need to see? So folks here are going to have some Post-its, and just like we did the bike rack exercise, we're going to write on our Post-it in these broad categories, things that we as the commission, things that you all would like to see changed or things that need to happen within these categories to make those drafts true. For folks joining virtually, I'll stand pretty close and I'll go through one by one and I'll just write on the Post-its and I'll go in after and stick them on the pages. And before we do that, any questions on the prompt or what we're up to, or?
Would you mind reading that statement again? Or can we post it on the chat or something so we can kind of reference that?
I can share it. I can share my screen. I have it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it is in tonight's agenda as well too. As
Okay,
Commissioner
yeah.
shared, all of the materials in here are there. And so the list too that Tevin just read, I believe is on page 6 of the categories.
Okay.
So if you pull up, and these are not, again, this is just a draft, right? So these are some of the ideas that have come up in conversations. Certainly there could be others that are not currently on them. And so there is a space for others. So as you're going through this, if you feel like, hey, I noticed a gap and we should also be taking a look at that, please let Kevin or myself know, or put it on a sticky note for those here in person into the other categories so that we can put it in there. But you should have that full list that Tevin just read in addition to the draft vision, mission, and values. We can certainly though share a screen though, Commissioner Sauer, so that you all can see it.
I have it, thank you. Yeah, I have the agenda pulled by the computer, so I have it. Thank you.
Just so I make sure I understand, are these specific action items that we're writing down?
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I hate to put you on the spot, but could you give us an example?
Absolutely. So we have a few examples from the bike rack. And so let's take an example of.
So Commissioner Sauer, while he's working on that too, just one thing I would say is it could be a specific thing. It could also be a goal that you want the city to be working towards, and then that might lead to conversations of more specificity in the future of, we have this goal, how do we actually go about making strides towards achieving that goal here in the short term, in the next 5 years, and then in the long term. So you can think about it in both ways. So it might be a kind of an ideal state, or it might be something specific that you think should happen in the short, medium, long term.
Okay.
And so Tevin, did you find a good example?
I do have a good example. So in this broad category of economic opportunities, so we read through the vision. And in this broad category of economic opportunities, something that was kind of put in as a data request is median household income by demographics. So for economic opportunities, what is it that we would like to see to make those statements true, ring true? What types of changes or what type of baseline do we want to see happen? And the how is not the question here, but just the what for this process. So what is it that we're going after when we say, economic opportunities? This is the vision, this is the mission, here's our values, and here's what we would like to see happen here. And then that's just one example. And so we're not gonna have time today to go through all of these. So I'll work with the folks joining virtually to just pick one category and I'll talk through them. And then folks here, feel free to get started with your sticky notes and some of your ideas, and you can begin pasting those.
Does everyone here have a pen?
Yep.
Great. So one thing that I would recommend doing is just.
So
set it
for
up so you
virtual
can walk
folks,
through,
I'm gonna
and
ask
once
first,
you
what
walk
category
through
would
at
you all
least
like to
once,
start
go
on?
back and see what other people have put, see if that maybe keys in some other thoughts or ideas as well. Like the sweater.
Does Ms. Shannon has a microphone on her?
Can you hear me all right?
We can hear Shannon really clear, but not you very well.
What if I sit on this side? Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah, seems better.
Yeah, that's better.
I'll stand right here. So of those categories, we have, just let me know if any of these stand out that you want to work on first, and we may only have time for one. So workforce development, cultural competency and diversity, service delivery and budgeting,
I'm still not sure. Sure.
transportation,
His example was
housing,
looking at the median income.
Sure, let's.
infrastructure,
That. But then he talked about vision, like.
workforce, work environment,
Median income to be.
Let me give you maybe another
Criminal
example right here on
justice.
transportation and infrastructure.
Yeah.
Going back to our
Communication. language
mission, right?
enhancements,
So we're an inclusive community.
community
Think
engagement,
Starting that and thinking about transportation and infrastructure, what does that mean
access,
to you?
social services, individual and family support,
Access,
public safety,
public transportation, again, anywhere.
economic opportunities,
I think that is a great thing to put down there, right? So.
other essential life
Infrastructure
activities,
is accessible, whether it's.
measurement,
public
accountability,
transportation or
partnerships,
roads,
or
for
something
all,
different that
right?
wasn't on this list.
So I think that would be a good thing of putting down there now. Again, it's.
I would like to see language enhancement side where the, the language, there should be a language interpretation for, based on the census report, that all those who are in ethnic group that provided with the language translation, any kind of information that is sent out.
Mhm. Absolutely. And again, that category for folks who'd like to also chime in is communication and language enhancement. So if this is truly that equitable community, what does that specific broad category look like? And so far we have language interpretation based on census.
That's the
When we're talking, make sure am I on mute? Okay. When we're talking measurements and accountability, who are we talking about? The community or police or criminal?
We have those other categories for public safety, for example. We also have a category for criminal justice. And so I think that's to be defined, you know, when we say accountability, what do we want to say?
Yeah, because it seems as though these days, like I was in the grocery store a couple of weeks ago and I saw some kids as I was going through self-checkout just roll out the store with carts full of groceries that they didn't pay for. And so the big thing right now is people aren't going to go after those kids because the police weren't there to witness it or whatever. And so people now are like, well, because they weren't right there when the crime was committed, they're not going to go after them. And so I'm like, I don't understand why.
And there's an accountability piece there that you're wanting to add.
Yeah.
In that scenario, what are you thinking is like the accountable part? Or I guess what's missing from that scenario, like to have made it go right?
In that scenario that I had mentioned, the clerk at the grocery store actually ran out after the kids and was able to film their license plate of the vehicle that they took off in. And so it's like, okay, do they go after that license plate and potentially those kids, if somebody could, talk about what they look like, or do people just get away with taking carts of groceries that they didn't pay for?
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And just a kind of a quick 2 notes on kind of like justice or criminal justice. There's some really great models out there right now that talk about transformative justice or restorative justice. And so some models look at that happen. These are things that are maybe lower level, but really asking the question as to why this happen. Is it related to income? Is it related to mental health? Is it related to these other factors? And also, how is that person involved in making that process go through? So sometimes they will, like, if someone's caught doing graffiti, well, now this person is going to be part of cleaning that up. And that's a bit more restorative than, maybe having someone with a record later. So I think there's different models of justice, and perhaps it can be kind of expanded to say, what are all the options? Or maybe we should look at alternative options, or dive deeper into, different scenarios that happen to find out what's the root cause here.
So if I can piggyback to about the public safety, I think that, what Bakita talks about, I can relate to that, but I think we could do both. I mean, the police can provide some public safety training to a lot of small business owners, especially for those are vulnerable, like doing one person, barbershop or grocery stores. They could definitely use some public safety type of a training, and also keeping the retailer accountable for not enforcing like minor theft, the minor coming in and stealing alcohol and stuff like that. A lot of time they do not go out and enforce where it's really public safety is an issue if you don't enforce something like that. So maybe that's another type of education that a police can provide, perhaps, that to address that kind of issue. That would be both definitely, you know, improve the public safety.
Mhm.
So police training is what what I am proposing. You know, when there's it's necessary. So who's there to provide public safety type of training? I mean, I can only look for law enforcement to provide that kind of a workshop or, you know, session, training, something like that. So
That's true. I mean, I'd hate for these grocery stores to look like, I mean, I just came back from the South a couple of months ago, and they had police officers at the door when you go into the Walmart or into the grocery stores. And so you can tell that they've had those types of issues. And I would hate for Lacey and Olympia in general to boil down to something like that.
Mhm. I just want to add, I think part of that incident where they're not going to pursue because the police weren't there has to do with some of the laws that were changed in the legislature and the limitations on what the police are able to do if they didn't actually see something.
Really, is that more of an interpretation type issue?
I don't know. See, because I've seen even news clips of you know, where there has been incidents and the police get there, but because they didn't see the person in action, they can't pursue them. And that's a recent change.
Even if there's witnesses?
I don't know. I don't know. But another thing I was going to add, the community youth services, which is actually downtown Olympia, they have a community accountability board, and they mostly work with youth. But I don't know if that's anything that Lacey would have the capacity to do. It is outside of the Lacey city limits, but a lot of youth from Lacey do end up going through that process. So maybe just I don't know.
The world we live in.
So regarding economic opportunities, I would like to also see some training or the workshop resource specifically provided to the vulnerable communities, you know, English as a second language or micro businesses, you know, small business where they have some resources. So I know that Rick and Wesley's group, they're doing something there, but that needs to be more enforced and that it's more systematically that those people can expect some, I mean, they know about these type of resources available, so trainings and stuff like that. So I would like to see that happening there.
Commissioners, I just wanted to jump in here really quickly. I know there was quite a robust conversation going on about a grocery store. What it really sounds like is kind of the safety for all community members, right? So whether you're the person shopping in there, you are the person who is running a small business, et cetera, right? And so when we're thinking about kind of the broader goals, and we're going to get towards thinking about strategies too, having a safe community for all members. We can certainly have, I'll follow up on, you know, the conversation of when, you know, the police does or does not engage, but, you know, certainly something to keep in mind too, is that some stores have policies on when they will continue a legal process with an individual who is shoplifting as well. So I think for the conversations for tonight, I would recommend, you know, it's great to have these conversations, but to go broad too, and we'll continue to refine these as we move forward and think about, you know, looking at a broad goal. For example, you know, we said public safety. One that I just used over here in infrastructure, for example, is infrastructure where every community member can get around. Every community member can access it. Now, we're not necessarily diving into kind of the nuances of, well, what does that exactly look like and how do we get there and what's achievable in the short term, medium term, or long term, but it's kind of thinking, you know, to be inclusive, to be accessible, you know, that would be something with the broad term of infrastructure to investigate further as a goal.
And I heard some really great comments and suggestions. So I have jotted down on my notes, just to recap, is language interpretation based on census, public safety training for small business owners, community accountability board, like the model that is in Olympia, and I think that's something that can be looked into. And additional training and workshops for ESL communities, as well as additional resources. So I think we have quite a few now. Do we want to do maybe one more category, and maybe we can do just like one kind of action or a priority each for one more category?
So can I add under measurement and accountability, last time that Chief came and gave that presentation, which was very helpful, more about transparency. It'll be great to have like periodic, report on the police actions or their performances. That would be really good, I think. Just basically transparency of their performances report.
Got it.
This is a category that I don't know if we have necessarily.
But not, yeah.
Access to and improvement in health outcomes.
What was that? Access to what?
Improvement in health outcomes. So physical and mental health. So there's so for example, Medicaid recipients, and looking at the disparities that might be there between what they're able to access for healthcare in the community and their outcomes. There's a lot of information on that with the Healthcare Authority online, but I don't know how specific it gets by region, but it's something to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's great. Would you think that that would also be something that we might want to include in the, oh, I wonder if we have a environment. Oh, I saw work environment. I thought we meant general environment as in like, because health outcomes can sometimes be related to what's happening in the environment.
Right, environmental justice. Yeah.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick one more category and then we're gonna share out. And so
Several things, right, that
let's see.
come to mind. One would be, providing.
Shouldn't we then add the environment, like, going green, if we don't have that already?
It's great to put that down there, Cliff, and we can continue to build off that conversation.
Yeah, we don't have it on the list just yet.
I think we should have that. I think that's a big issue that we should all be aware and do something about.
Any ideas in that same category?
Electric vehicle stations that you're gonna lease?
Obviously no plastic, that's one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, stop using plastic. So promote like no plastic, even when we did a cultural celebration in last March 5th, we didn't use a knife and forks plastic. We used the square, the wooden pick to use for pick food. I mean, there's a ways that we can do those things. So even when you make a state, I mean, the city of Lacey make any kind of purchase, they need to stop purchasing any kind of a plastic goods and substitute that into something bio or earth-friendly products.
Except the straws. I do not like those paper straws. Those are horrible.
I'm sorry, what?
The straws. The paper straws are nasty.
You can use the
steel ones.
Pasta, right? Pasta.
Oh gosh, they have pasta straws. Oh wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look into that.
Okay, any final thoughts from anyone who maybe didn't get a chance to share?
What about transportation's another good one too? We just don't have a lot of course, within Thurston County, it's decent, but people who maybe have no choice to work outside of Thurston County, that transportation is forward.
So
You know,
Or telework.
what was that? Telework, if you could. The individual I'm thinking about is custodian, so there's no telework there. They've got to go in. So that plus the workforce one, because I think if he made more money down here, we wouldn't be looking at this individual working in Pierce County. But that's where he can make a little bit more money and live more equitably down here in Thurston.
Their parents, the parents don't really know what.
Yeah, but access to back and forth to work is what you see.
One
Great.
said, I wish there was a church. It wasn't about church.
So everyone, we're gonna just wrap up. Thanks, everyone. We're gonna wrap up in about 1 minute, and I'd like to just end with some sharing about this activity, anything that stood out, things that you know, folks found to be helpful, anything we gained from this process. So if you have like any last minute things to jot down, feel free to do that quickly, and then we will be on our way. And I see a lot of stickies here. This is great. And I have all your stickies here, so I'm gonna paste these.
So just really quickly, commissioners, one thing to note about the mic that we have in here is it's a directional mic. And so it takes a second to pick you up. And if somebody else is talking, they will already talking, it'll pick them up first. So just so everyone's aware of why it might take a second for those who are remote can hear us.
Go sit down.
Yeah, feel free to have a seat if you'd like. So I just wanted to open it up for folks virtually and folks here. If you want to share out specifics about what you wrote on your sticky or what you thought about this process as we kind of get wrapped up, feel free to do that now.
Well, I had concerns with the warehouse district. Many of them huge, you know, Ferguson, Uline, Amazon, and they're still building more. And so my question is, will the community, well, my hope is that the city of Lacey would communicate what kind of partnership we have with them. What are they doing to give back to the community to make it a better place to live and a welcoming community, those types of things. I mean, they're there, they're growing, they're huge, but we get nothing that says, this is what's going on. This is how they are giving back to the community. Just share that type of stuff. Do a story on it. Call in, you know, CNN or somebody to do a big story on it. Small community, huge warehouses. Or something.
Yeah, push them to hire locally. Don't import all the employees. So young folk live here would like those good paying jobs, you know, hire locally. And that's a theme in the partnership with the city. In some of the permits and licensing and, you know, if you build that here, you got to enlarge the road. You got, okay, you got to hire locally. You know, show us your workforce is representative of the community. Make it a partnership agreement. So when the Uline and the rest of them come in here, they know they have a certain percentage of local workers and then another percentage, they still need to import some more folk. But
and programs for high schoolers in the summer, are there restrictions or limitations on them working in the warehouses? Or are there some jobs that they can do? And then what's the program to get our youth employed in the summertime?
Partnership agreements.
That's great. Anyone joining virtually that you know, has something to add about what stood out to them about this activity or things that were coming up for them?
I think we came up with a pretty good list. I was, delighted. Pakita, Christine, and Rihanna, we could kind of agree on what I think our list.
Kim, I really like some of the suggestions you made for some of the things that I was talking about as well. So
Yeah, and I think that's part of the beauty of a process like this is having done some of that pre-work, the visioning, the mission draft, the values draft, it really does help guide and frame some of what we're coming up with. We have a shared starting point versus, folks that may be coming in other projects or programs where, folks are starting at different places, maybe not in full alignment or understanding of what it is that the group is up to or who they're here to serve. And so I think it's it was really great that this group has come together to do this work at the beginning. And so as these are being built out in these broad categories, and as they're being shared back with the community, as we connect with more affinity groups, what we're going to end up with at the end of this process is something pretty powerful, I believe.
One of them that I'll comment on, I put a sticky under service delivery and budgeting. After all is said and done, after this strategic plan is put in place, after it merges with the city's strategic plan, the operative question for me becomes, what are we going to do differently to achieve this new equitable world for everybody that we're envisioning and hoping for? Because it can't be business as usual to get from where we are to where we say we want to be without some things being done differently. And one area is in the budgeting. So much isn't going to happen by itself, by way of personnel, by way of facilities, by way of commitment to whatever. So that's way further up the road, but you put a strategic plan together and it becomes the how. We're talking about the what, but when you get to the how, the budget and the service delivery model becomes very, very important. What will be done differently? Otherwise, you just continue to get what we've been getting, an inequitable situation in a community that's continuing to grow in diversity more and more every year. That becomes the hard part.
Chair Jackson, I think that's a kind of a great segue, although I certainly want to hear if there's any other feedback too, to kind of thinking about what we're going to be doing with this information as we continue to gather it. And I'll let Tevin kind of explain that and I'll jump in a little bit more, but
yeah, thank you so much.
Good transition.
Yeah, great transition. So now that we have a few ideas down, so this is not the last opportunity to add to these categories. We have done a lot of work now today, but what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these suggestions and create the bike rack activity, but we're just going to build it out with all of these items here. So the next piece is prioritizing action, and this is sometimes it could be the hard part, because what it is, it's whittling down. When we look at these Post-its and we think to ourselves, what's possible in 1 year? The question becomes what's most important in 1 year, because there's only going to be so many things that are possible in 1 year. But then we can look at, okay, well, what happens in year 2 and what happens in year 3? Which pieces do we have in front of us that is more of that low-hanging fruit that we can grab onto and change tomorrow? And then which things are going to take more data and more collaboration to change over time? The power of a strategic plan is that we can set a schedule for those things. If it takes 5 years to move something, then we'll put it in place in year 1, and in year 5, we'll have made progress towards that, and that thing will be changed. And so that speaks to the strategy piece, that long-term strategy. Nothing becomes equitable in a day. It didn't take a day to become unequitable. So I think it's really a marathon and not a sprint. But that's what we're going to do next is I'm going to collect up all of our ideas, and then we're going to do a prioritization activity where we say, okay, now that we have all these in front of us, if we had to select maybe just 2 actionable items or 3 actionable items for the next year or the next 2-3 years or the next 5 years, what would those be? We'll just talk a little bit more about that process as we meet next month.
And so I just really quickly want to check in with the commission. I know this was, an exercise that we ran through. I have certainly learned a lot about hybrid and, how I would maybe tweak a few things in like the setup. And so I want to make sure that, you all had some opportunity to see this and then also to revisit it in the next couple of weeks. So what I will do, if the commission finds it helpful, is send out all of these categories, just like we have them out here today. And I'll have Tevin give us all the information that was, gathered here remotely and then also in person, and then have a survey so you all can continue to fill out things that you might be thinking about in the next 2 weeks. And that way we can continue that compilation going. So it's not just right now. We'll have it open for 2 weeks and then we'll come back to all of what we gathered in those 2 weeks and then here tonight, and then have a pickup of this conversation, continuing it as we look to start thinking about, well, what does prioritization look like? How does that impact, budget, for example, and goals of the city, et cetera, moving forward? So would that be helpful for the commission?
Yes.
Well, with that, I feel pretty complete now, and I know there might be some other items to get up to, but I'll just hang out because I'd like to either capture these in a picture or I might take them with me, but just make sure I grab these, so thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to item 5, our commission reports. And Vice Chair Brown, you're going to report to us on Juneteenth.
Yes, Shannon and I had a meeting with Melvin from the Fred U. Harris Lodge a couple of weeks ago. And this is something that we're building on. And so he once again shares some things that he would request of Lacey in helping them to bring about an excellent event. And Shannon was able to share some of the things that we can do in partnership and work with him to do some of those things. And just a couple of things that we're going to work with him on. One is, and I talked to him the other day too, flyers. He's drafting a flyer that he'll be presenting to be tweaked and looked at and those types of things. Other things that are ongoing is the development of the content for the College Street banner. That would be something that we'll be working on with them. And the development of a list of invites to 3 to 4, maybe 5 organizations that will provide information booths at the event. And we talked about 3 or 4 or 5 of them, and we'll revisit that and actually look at invitations and inviting them in to be a part of it. And then the invites to, key people, that being the governor, Congresswoman Strickland, of course, the mayor, others who we would be inviting or looking to invite to see if they're available to come and greet the people at that particular event. And something else that they asked for is help from some volunteers to pull off the event, like setting up in the morning, people to actually kind of assist the cooks in setting up the serving line and serving those types of things, the cleanup, maybe setting up some tables and things along those lines. So I had developed a chart of volunteers with some of those tasks that I was going to email them to them, but my computer went down today. So we'll work through that as well in gathering volunteers. They primarily will be, this gives them a way to organize their volunteers, to identify them, get them committed, give them times to be there. When I talk to guys in my organization, those are the questions they were asking me. They're like, we don't just show up. We, what are the tasks we're going to be doing, what hours, those types of things. So I'll help them to work through that piece, as well. So the planning continues. We'll meet again this on Wednesday, and we'll just keep moving forward. Shannon, anything to add?
I think that was a good summary. And, you know, one thing that we are still looking at in addition to helping with some communication and awareness, as well as some booths too, is potentially, you know, bringing a group in, whether it's like a history talk or some sort of cultural exhibition or something, working with the Fred U. Harris Lodge to figure out what exactly they would be looking for to help augment their Juneteenth celebration.
And we're looking at having a tent, the Commission on Equity, so we'll want volunteers to be there, similar to what we did at the cultural celebration, be to share information and to interact with the community members.
And it sounds like there's lots of
Video, but I hate being on camera.
What was that?
Sorry about that, I volunteer.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. She volunteered.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Maybe that can take us right on into a brief discussion on the cultural celebration that a number of us attended and staffed the booth for the Equity Commission. Those of us who participated, did you consider that to be a worthwhile use of our Saturday? Something we would like to throw our hat in the ring a year from now to make sure it's in the planning going forward? Any comments about those who were actually in attendance?
I think we made quite a few good connections, got some business cards from different people there that we might be pulling in. They might be on our network for different focus groups. I thought it was really good that we were there. A lot of people stopped by. That was worthwhile.
Yeah, I thought it was really good, and the food was good too.
So I hear a thumbs up
Absolutely.
to send word to the Parks Department that the Equity Commission would like to participate again next year,
Yes.
right?
Definitely. I was also going to say that I think all around it was really great. I'm sorry, can you hear me? I'm getting some confused. All around it was really great. There were a few negative interactions, but they weren't too awful, and we were able to handle them somewhat gracefully. And I think just the fact that our presence was there was making a statement in and of itself. And regardless of the folks didn't have necessarily anything positive to provide us with feedback, they still knew that we and kind of getting an idea of the work that we're accomplishing here.
Great.
I echo that. I think what Jonathan saw there. Even though I didn't come and help our booth, we Korean community had 3 booths, and it was just a great opportunity to connect with community and show our Korean community. Anyway, do we have any like stats or number of people participated, or I mean, do we have any kind of information about that event?
Commissioner Sauer, we don't have information on the number of people who came to our booth, but I can certainly check with the Parks Department to see if they have a good idea of the number of people who came to the event.
Great. And the other event we had since we last met was our joint session with the Youth Commission. And I think we all thoroughly enjoyed that. And I've heard some comments since, especially from the point of view of partnership with the schools. And we heard some interesting comments from the youth about what they're experiencing in schools today. And a lot of it centered around race, inequitable treatment, a lack of voice, lack of respect for points of view. And it dawned on me afterwards saying, the challenge for us as we're talking about trying to create, make sure that an equitable community exists. We can't have an equitable community if we don't have equitable schools. And so in one sense, with us being an advisor to the city, that's one elected body, one jurisdiction. And over here, you have another elected jurisdiction called school districts with school boards and that kind of thing. But here, through our youth voices, giving us a picture and really expressing, you know, I asked the question, what would it take for you to want to come back to this community and live once you finish school, graduate, work, whatever? And they said, I don't want my kids growing up here. I don't want my kids subjected to racial harassment. You know, that's not having an equitable community if it's not equitable enough to attract and keep our young folk. They're the future citizens. They make the future babies, you know. So where's the nexus? Where's the connection between what the Black Student Union and their protests and walkout and strikes, what's that telling us about? And it wasn't just Black students, but what's that telling us about their feelings, about the surroundings they're in most of their time as young folk growing up? And at some point, maybe something we want to discuss. How do we connect more? You know, to say to the educational system, this is what we're hearing from young people. They're saying you aren't listening, but we're concerned because they are in the community and your schools are part of our community. How can this partnership? I've been thinking along those lines. Any other similar thoughts from other people? We don't just want to come together once a year and have chit chat and food with the young folk, and then that's it until next year. And we become just another group of adults that really, they leave feeling as though, did they really hear what we had to say? You know, did it? So I don't know, but where does the Equity Commission in our broader tentacles reaching out, touch bases with we got youth, you know, all up and down every list you come up with. So what? What about the youth? Just the future of the community, that's all. And they're telling us their community isn't an equitable community. And what do we do?
They told us that they felt heard from our group. And I wonder how they can know that we are supporting them, and how beyond just this conversation, like you said, can we show our support to the youth, and especially because things are happening right now. And I don't know if it's appropriate for the Commission on Equity to write a letter to the school board saying we've heard, we had a great meeting, we're in support of some of the things that you all are doing, some of the things that the students are asking. I mean, it would have to be a well-crafted letter, but so that the school board knows that we're here as well and make some kind of connection.
And then where does it start? I mean, this couldn't have started and gotten rooted in high school. This had to start way back. If a high schooler is saying, I don't want to raise my children in this area, this is starting well before high school. So I think we do need to involve not only the upper echelon of the school district, but I mean the teachers, the parents, all of it. Something's
But
not right.
I agree with Commissioner Annie's. One of the students made that request. I mean, you come and speak with us type of thing, because they tried and they one of the students said that it wasn't accepted. So I think that we endorsing and going and supporting, with that letter or meeting, even in a regular base, I think that would be great support, and that is something we should consider doing.
Shannon, I feel like I saw, and I think this already happened. Doesn't the city council have a joint work session with the school district that happened or is going to happen?
That's correct, Commissioner Stolberg. I believe it's twice a year that the Lacey City Council meets with the North Thurston Public School District School Board, and I do believe that it's coming up in the next month or two. One thing that, just kind of to bring it back on the Commission on Equity is, certainly we're looking, as we look at our strategic plan too, right? What can the city lead? What can the city be a partner on? And what can the city advocate for, right? And so I want to just highlight, Chair Jackson mentioned, hey, we've got an elected board between the city of Lacey and the school district. So this would, something where we're really looking for partnership, right? And this is something, or advocacy and partnership. And so certainly thinking of ways that maybe that we can do that. And one thing that I certainly heard the youth mention and Chair Jackson mention is we don't want this to be a once a year thing and then to never have this again. And what I heard was that they really liked youth-led initiatives and youth voices being heard. And so I think one of the questions that the Commission on Equity can certainly, start to contemplate is how can we continue to provide a platform for youth voices? We have the Lacey Youth Council, but are there other opportunities that might be city, sponsored, city-led programs or city-backed programs that might help provide a platform for North Thurston Public School District or private school district or other school districts maybe that live here in the city to continue to have their voice heard in the greater community?
And in this communication, someone mentioned a letter to just say, we had a joint meeting with the Youth Commission, some members of the Youth Commission, and some of the concerns that were shared with us were the following. And we know some of those have been shared with you as well. Can you update us on what is going on to address some of these things internally to your school district and to your school buildings? Just probe in that manner other than assert ourselves on them, but let them know we've had this communication and we heard what they said. Now we're reaching out to our partner group who has a responsibility to do something about it. Share with us what's going on because we just heard it from the students and there's always another side of the story. But a partnership has to be that way, and just let a dialogue begin to form. How can we help you in what you're struggling with? Because the stuff isn't limited to a schoolyard or school building. It creeps out into the community, believe me, it is out there. And so the lines of demarcation get real jaded real fast. And so there's been a lot of community involvement in what's been going on in those schools. So I'm just, just taking what we learned from the students and the ones who shared with us so openly. Where do we go with the information we gathered from them, of the things we heard, or who do we, reach back out and say, we're concerned about some of the comments we heard our young people say as community people. I don't know.
And Chair Jackson, a comment and a recommendation, once again, I think to consider thinking about it in, again, what can the city lead? How can the city leverage partners in the community? And then what can the city advocate for? We had a focus group with the Lacey Youth Council. We are looking to set up more focus groups in the future. So something that we can certainly look to do if this commission would like is perhaps a focus group with local educators and see if we can invite, individuals from a broad spectrum of education levels to come talk to and have a conversation and a dialogue and talk about, future possibilities for collaborations for highlighting, youth voices in the community moving forward.
In thinking about this, to me, it feels like Commission on Equity could be fostering our own partnership with the school district, but maybe you're saying that the city needs to do the fostering. But I want what we're focusing on, what we're tasked to do includes what they're doing and what the students are asking.
So I guess Commissioner Clay, what I would just kind of draw back the attention to is, this group is that advisory body, right, to the city council. And so, again, what can the city lead? What can the city partner? And what can the city advocate for? And, using that as the lens for that connectivity across the community.
Okay, so then our body, I mean, the city asks us to look at things. We can ask the city to look at things. Is there something that in some statement that we can say from to the city council? This is what we experience with the youth council, and this is some of our values around this, and we would like to see more stronger partnership, or we would like to see more platforms, or what, is there anything that we can do as a body now to push this in some direction?
Yeah, no, I think there's several things that this group can do. And number one is, it's not just, like building relationships and partnerships. It's not just at the city council level, right? It's obviously at multiple levels. And, with this board, again, inviting, different community perspectives to come in and have conversations and have dialogues on, tough community conversations that, and issues that are out there. So certainly that's something that this body could do. This body could also make recommendations to the city council on, suggestions that they might have for how the city, could be a lead, or could be a partner, or could be an advocate in certain areas. So that's certainly something that the Commission on Equity could work on and make some recommendations in those areas.
I think, yeah, that's kind of it. So when the city council has their meeting with the school district, I think, at least for me, it would be good to even just watch it to get a better idea of what that partnership looks like, because I don't really know. And if we're going to be forming a different partnership with the school district, how is that going to look different than the partnership they have with the city council?
So Commissioner Stolberg, in follow-up, I will certainly tomorrow, when I send out my email to all of you, just providing some recap information, make sure that I let you all know when that tentative date is scheduled for that joint meeting with the North Thurston Public School District. So you all can attend in public or view online.
Great. Thank you. I just didn't want that wonderful evening to just fall by the wayside. It was so rich and so informative. So this is good discussion. Thank you. I think that follow-up is great, Shannon.
And Chair Jackson too, I think there, we're, when we're talking about a city-led elements right now, right? And we're looking at the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. There were a lot of things that came up that I hope when we go through this process and as we continue to have these conversations that we certainly see some of them. And, I'll just highlight a couple that I recall is number one, and I already said this once before, is youth voices and youth-led initiatives and youth platforms, right? And that's certainly something that, the city can do all three of those: lead, partner, and advocate. Another one was greater education in the community and awareness about racism and equity issues. A third one was behavioral health education in the community and getting information and news out there. And then a fourth one was how to engage civilly in tough conversations.
Civilly.
Right? And so these are all things that I think, as we're looking, what can the Commission on Equity do? What can the city do short term, medium term, long term? Certainly as we're thinking across that spectrum of lead, partner, and advocate are areas that we could take a look into immediately for strategies moving forward.
Yeah, great.
Right.
I did want to say something. Sorry, guys. I absolutely agree with Chair Jackson about the joint meeting that we had. I think it was amazing. Myself and my fellow youth council members, we had a conversation about how the dialogue that we all had was great. And I think the biggest thing that we talked about was the sense of perspective that you guys were able to understand from our point of view and what we go through as students in the North Thurston School District, especially myself as a minority, and then as a girl, and my other youth council members who are in the same boat, who experience racial prejudice and sexism. So I think moving forward, having those conversations and keeping those relations between the Commission on Equity and the youth council is so important. Moving forward, not just like Chair Jackson said, not just having an event like that once a year, keeping that consistent so that we can actually push for change. Alanis, and who is also a Commission on Equity, I'm sure you guys are very familiar with her. She couldn't be here tonight, but her and Layla, they're very big on they're big what's the term I'm looking for? They were big leaders in our protests. And so us being able to get together with you guys and have open conversation where you guys are actually putting yourselves in our shoes and you guys are able to see what we're going through and just be there and advocate for us on a higher level, because many adults aren't willing to see what we're going through. They think because we're minors, we lack perspective, or what we're saying isn't valuable. So what you guys are doing is very important, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rihanna. Yes. Okay, I think we've kind of bashed on that one pretty good, where we made a lot more work for ourselves, but if we don't connect these dots, then our coming together once a month is useless too.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. After our meeting concludes, and one last thing I want to say, I promised you guys a copy of my book, and I do have them tonight for you. Those of you online, next time I see you, I'll have to, connect with you. But yeah, I did that. They're here in this little sack. So when we conclude our meeting tonight, I'll be proud to present you with a copy. So
Thank you.
That takes us to our director report. Does any other commissioner have any comments or anything to say? Okay, then that takes us to our director, Shannon.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. Just a couple of things tonight. Number one, I just want to say my appreciation and gratitude for you all for being part of this hybrid meeting as we work through this process. As I said at the beginning, patience is key. I have certainly learned a lot of things about this, and I look forward to more meetings in this hybrid environment moving forward. The second thing that I wanted just to touch briefly on is that I'll be sending out the email with some follow-up information after tonight's meeting. And part of that is also going to be just a schedule of our meetings so that you all can see in advance of some of the things that are tentatively scheduled to come before the Commission on Equity. I've gotten a couple of questions about, hey, what's coming up? And so this will just help provide a better idea of some of the items. It won't be a full agenda like I send out. It's just more of a, here's a tentative list. And so just to let you all know, for our next meeting, we are going to have a couple of guest speakers in addition to Tevin join us for continuing the diversity, equity, inclusion strategic plan. We're going to be having our parks director come and provide an overview of a couple of policies and engagement efforts that they are wanting to do, that they're going to want some feedback on. And so because there are a couple more documents that we're going to be looking at, I'm going to really try to get the packet out to you a little bit earlier so that you all can take the time to go through those materials. And what the Parks Department is really going to be looking for is, your feedback, thoughts and comments on any additions that they might want to consider making to these policies moving forward. That is it for me, Chair Jackson.
All right. Is there any other business to come before this board, this commission? Seeing none, hearing none, then we stand adjourned at 7:55.
Right. Okay, then. So now you'll have to come every month and be with us. Huh? Yep. Bye, guys. Bye, everybody.
Diana, very well said. I just wanted to give you that compliment for speaking up at the end.
Thank you. Thank you.